My guest this evening is none other than Marvin Blum, founding partner at the Blum Firm. You're the largest in Texas.
That's correct. Thank you for
the largest firm in Texas. Now, Texas is a big place.
Well, let's clarify. Largest estate planning boutique firm. Yeah, we have.
Boutique firm.
We have 29 lawyers right now, but still growing. But that's actually the largest group of estate planning lawyers in one shop.
Wow! Congratulations.
Thank you.
Wow. Now, you touched on this earlier in the show, and you said it really well, but I want to really talk about this because it's such an important point. You said that not planning a business transaction is actually much more expensive than letting the pieces fall where they may and the heirs dealing with it at a later time.
Yeah, it is very costly not to do this kind of transition planning. And I will mention that the costs are on two levels. One level, of course, is financial, but the other level is emotional. And it can really tear a family apart if you haven't taken the steps to plan ahead. But let's talk a moment about the financial, and I'm going to mention the idea of estate tax, because we learned in this latest tax act that the estate tax is here to stay. It was not repealed. I don't think it's going to get repealed at any time that we can foresee. Mm-hmm. And the reality is these family businesses can end up being worth a lot of money, a lot more than people realize. And therefore, if you don't plan to transition your business properly, the IRS can pop you with a very hefty estate tax bill when the founder of the business dies. And then the family is scrambling around, has 9 months to raise a chunk of money that's equal to 40% of what the business is worth. And the government wants cash. So I will tell you that another aspect of this kind of planning, in addition to identifying a successor and those things, is the tax side. Because we do what we call estate freeze planning. Like you take the value of the business at what it's worth today, and you freeze it at that value by transferring it out of your name and into certain trusts so that the future growth on the business is not in your pocket. And this is sometimes called squeeze and freeze planning, because if you do it right, you also can squeeze the value down using valuation discounts. But time is not your friend on this. The longer you wait to do it, the harder it is to pull this off. So here again, you want to start early. And if you are earlier in the timeline, you can accomplish a big valuation discount, and you can freeze the value before this company goes up in value. And certainly you want to do this long in advance of selling a business where the value has been now documented, and you would have a very hard time valuing it for less than that sales price.
Now, just to move off of the topic of business for a moment, and this came up in the New York Times article, which we will discuss a little later. I'm not sure if it was you or one of the other guests in that column had commented that it even is advisable that people start transferring some of their money during the person's life. Don't just wait till the person passes on.
Yeah, that was me. I am a big believer in what I call pre-funding an inheritance to your kids and not waiting until you're gone for an inheritance to be set aside for kids. And that way, the patriarch and matriarch have the comfort of knowing that their kid's inheritance is secure. It's in a protected pocket now, in a trust that is protected from creditors, protected from divorce, and it will be there for future generations. And they can begin to see their kids enjoy it. They don't, I pointed out in the article, when somebody inherits in their 60s, usually they're at a point in time where they don't need it.
Right, that's
and
true.
Wouldn't it be nice to do something earlier in the picture when your kids can actually
benefit?
They need it, and you get the nachas of watching them enjoy
Great
it.
Word,
Yeah. It is a very gratifying feeling. And baby boomers like me and many of my generation are looking for fulfillment in their life at this point. You know, we're kind of in that last chapter we're going into, and you want to believe that your life meant something and that you've had a legacy that you passed down to others. And if you can see the benefits of your labor helping future generations, it's very gratifying.
Now, you mentioned earlier we touched on about a business searching for and landing a great successor. Are there any tips for that particular, any guidance on that?
There are. I think, first of all, you want to involve a team of advisors that will include, again, somebody with some psychological skills who will interview all the stakeholders. And who are the stakeholders? This is your family members. It's all the key employees of the company. It's people who have an interest in this company. And the independent advisors can find out things that the founder may not hear about. Because people won't always open up and tell daddy what they really are, what's really on their mind, but they will tell an independent party, and they can gather information and help the founder assess who's really suitable to run this company. There's an example of a man who was in his 80s who had a son in his 60s. And the 80-year-old said, I'm going to transition this business over to him, but he's not ready. Okay. So the advisor interviews the 60-year-old and learns that the guy is about to retire and has no intention of working much more. And the father's thinking, when he's ready, I'm going to hand it down to him. Well, there's a disconnect in this family. So you see my point. You've got to survey the landscape here. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of overlooked options here. There are people like I mentioned, the son-in-law that the fellow picked. I mean, you know, sometimes that's a good choice. I tell you, I read a really interesting article that said the most overlooked option in this are females. That there is a generation that believes I've got to look for the male heir who is best suited to take over my business. And they have discovered, and there's some statistics on this now, that women coming in and running a company tend to do an extremely good job, even better than men. And I think they bring the sensitivity that it requires for them to navigate the delicacy of an ownership transition. And so women are a great candidate. And so you may have a daughter or a daughter-in-law who you're not thinking about that might be the right one.
There was an article in 2014 in the New York Times, and the title was Looking for Ways to Keep Money from Dividing a Family. A really fantastic article. You just Google it, and you'll see the wisdom from Marvin Blum in that article. There's a quote there that you said. We touched on it earlier, but it's really a fantastic quote. I want to repeat it. You wrote this a couple years ago and identified your age then. I'm at a point in my life where the things I want, I can't buy with money. I want relationships and memorable moments. Really nail on the head.
Well, the older you get, the more you kind of figure out what really matters to you. And I'm grateful that I had that revelation because it has really shaped a lot of decisions I've made ever since I figured that out. Thank you.
Yeah,
that's
but
what brings
special.
me to New York often is I have this wonderful daughter and her family here, and I am determined to spend a lot of time here. I think you have to be present to win when you're in this grandparent role.
That's amazing. Special.
Thank you.
Special, very special. So, in the article, a lot was discussed, and in fact, you even, there was that symposium that they talk about, and they really cover a lot. Now, they talk about financial planning, but again, for the purpose of tonight's conversation, we're focusing on the business side of things. For a business that realize that they do have to start addressing the issue of succession planning, but they identify a few players that may, let's say there are grandchildren already in there, and there are, I'll, if I may present even a bit of a complicated case, there may be 8 children already, grandchildren in the family, but there are only 2 or 3 stars. Oy vey.
Oy vey. It happens all the time. Let's talk about that one. And first of all, I want to take that and separate 2 concepts. One is the concept of ownership, and the other is the concept of management. You may leave the ownership of the company in equal shares to everybody in your family, but that doesn't mean the management of the company goes to everybody in equal shares. And so I could own a stake in a business that is but not necessarily be part of the management team on that business, because you want to put the right managers in who are really going to do what's best for the business. But you have to be very careful here, because you also have to be sure there is a cash flow that will go out to those who are not active in the business, or else there's going to be ill will. I'll share a couple of stories on this.
Sure, please.
There was a client that I was working with who had a family business, and he had a couple of nephews working in the business with him. And then he had a daughter who was not in the business. And he said to me that he was going to leave the business to the two nephews because the daughter really didn't need any money. And I said, how important is it to you that your daughter continue getting along with her cousins after you're gone? He said, oh, well, it's extremely important to me. She has no siblings. This is all she's got, and they've got to get along. They've got to stay together. I said, what you're describing is a recipe for friction. There's going to be resentment, tremendous resentment. If the bulk of your estate passes to somebody else other than your daughter, it doesn't matter to her whether she needed it or not. Her cousins are going to inherit this company, and she's not going to get any of it. I said, there are other ways to do this, and equalize. You can set up a buy-sell arrangement for these boys to buy the company. You can fund it with life insurance. You can dedicate life insurance to be used to benefit your daughter if you want to leave something else to these boys. There's ways to make everybody get ownership of or a piece of this pie. You can do voting and non-voting stock. You can have you can leave the company and the stock into a trust and name an objective party to serve as trustee who would vote the stock. I mean, there's just a lot of creative solutions, but you've got to do something other than what you're planning. I read an article in New York Times about the File family here in New York. It was a multi-billion-dollar real estate empire, and when when Louis File died, he had groomed his son Jeffrey to take over the business, and there was all these articles because Jeffrey's sisters were suing him. And it turned out that Jeffrey was running the company the way his father intended, but he was pumping all the profits back into the company, and each sister was getting about $300,000 a year, and in their family that was not much. And there was big resentment, and they sued him saying that he was trying to starve them out. And I think you have to think about an empire like that. You might have to sell off some pieces of real estate in order to provide cash flow to some of the players who are not going to be active in the they're not getting a salary like their brother Jeffrey got. And you know, Rockefeller family, they sold Rock Center. I mean, it can be done. The Pritzker family is a great example of doing things right. They broke up their empire. They had Hyatt hotels. They had the Royal Caribbean cruise line. They broke it up into pieces and divided it up. And therefore, people were able to figure out a way that everybody got something meaningful and had a cash flow stream coming their way.
Well, what's so refreshing is to hear, especially from an attorney, that the psychological aspect is so huge, is so paramount, and cannot be ignored. Meaning, people can't just rush in and say, "Hey, well, this is the way it is," and they'll make it work, and they'll sign on the bottom line.
And I'm not going to be here to worry about it. Well, you know what? You'll roll over in your grave. I mean, people that care about their family need to rest in peace. And honestly, they deserve the peace of knowing that they've not left a mess behind for their kids to fight over.
I love the honor of interviewing C-level executives and sharing their great advice and perspective on Mind Your Business. I'd love to get your feedback. Post it in the comments below and subscribe. You'll never miss an edition of Mind Your Business.